Every truth hides a darker secret.
9 hikers vanished on a mountain that the locals called the Dead One. Their tent was ripped open from the inside. Their bodies scattered across the snow. No footprints. No answers. Only one phrase in the final report. Unknown compelling force. This is the night the mountain screamed. February 1959. The Ural Mountains. 9 young hikers, students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, set up their tent on the slope of Kholat Syakhl, a name that in the language of the Monsi people means the mountain of the dead. They were experienced, disciplined people who lived for the challenge of the wild. Their leader, Igor Dyatlov, was 23. An engineer in training, precise, methodical. He believed in logic. He believed that the mountain could be conquered if one simply respected its rules. That night, those rules changed. The last photograph on their camera shows the group smiling, laughing, standing beside the tent they would never leave. Hours later, in temperatures below -30 degrees Celsius, something made them cut through the tent from the inside and flee barefoot into the snow. No footprints led to them, only a way. Their bodies were found weeks later, scattered across the slope. Some half-dressed, some barefoot, some with injuries no one could explain. One had a fractured skull. 2 had missing eyes. Another, missing her tongue. Their clothes contained traces of radiation. And the tent, still standing, half buried in snow, its poles unbroken, its fabric sliced open from within. It was as if they hadn't tried to escape something outside, but something inside themselves. The Soviet investigation called it a natural disaster. But the reports contradicted themselves. There was no avalanche, no animal tracks, no sign of a fight. The bodies lay in positions that defied logic. Some running downhill, some crawling toward the tent, as if trying to return to safety that no longer existed. The cause of death for all: unknown compelling force. 3 words that turned an accident into a legend. In the decades that followed, scientists, journalists, and conspiracy theorists would tear apart every piece of this mystery. They would blame the government, the military, aliens, even the mountain itself. But the truth, whatever it was, stayed buried beneath snow and silence. Something happened that night, wrote one investigator in his diary. Something that frightened 9 people more than the cold, more than death itself. For nearly 3 weeks, the mountain was silent. 9 people had vanished. No messages. No radio signals. No trace. Then, on February 26, 1959, a search team led by fellow students and local volunteers found the first sign. A tent, half buried in snow, its fabric shredded, cut open from the inside. Everything inside looked frozen in time. Boots neatly arranged along the entrance. Jackets folded. Cameras, diaries, a flask of alcohol. Food laid out as if they had been about to eat. But the stove, untouched. The door, closed from the inside. And 9 pairs of footprints led away from the tent. Barefoot or in socks, marching calmly into the white void. For almost a mile, those prints continued, perfectly straight, as if the group had walked, not run. Then they disappeared into drifting snow. The first 2 bodies were found at the edge of the forest, beneath a cedar tree. They were barefoot, dressed only in underwear. A small fire had been lit, its branches broken by hand, not cut. The tree above them had its bark torn off several meters high, as if someone had tried to climb in desperation. Nearby, rescuers found 3 more bodies: Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin, spaced evenly along a line leading back toward the tent. Each had fallen in the snow, faces turned toward where safety should have been. It looked like they had tried to return and never made it. The final 4 were missing for 2 more months. When the snow melted in May, they were found deeper in the ravine, under 4 meters of snow. Their injuries were different: massive internal trauma, fractured ribs, one with a crushed skull, but no external wounds, as if hit by a shockwave. One woman's tongue was missing. 2 had their eyes gone. Their clothes showed higher levels of radiation than background normal. The official autopsy concluded death by unknown compelling force. The investigators noted inconsistencies everywhere. Why were they half-dressed in -30 degrees Celsius? Why was the tent cut open from the inside? Why were their watches all stopped at different times between 2:30 and 5 a.m.? And what about the faint orange spheres of light that locals claimed to see in the sky that night? Several witnesses, Monsey hunters, railway workers, soldiers, reported glowing orbs moving silently above the Ural Ridge. No explanation ever followed when the military arrived. The tone of the investigation changed. Soldiers cordoned off the site. Photographs were confiscated. Files were stamped classified. One searcher later said, "After the officers came, we were told not to ask questions, just to dig and carry." Rumors spread quickly. Some said the hikers stumbled upon a secret weapons test. Others whispered about radiation from a fallen rocket. No one could prove it, and no one dared to ask twice. Back in Sverdlovsk, the families demanded answers. They were told their children had died peacefully, but the photo said otherwise. The faces of the dead were twisted in terror, their hands frozen mid-motion, as if shielding themselves from something unseen. One investigator wrote privately, "It was as if they fought something that wasn't there." The case was closed that summer. All records marked top secret. The official cause: hypothermia due to natural elements. Unofficially, everyone in the Ural region knew. The Dyatlov group had seen something they were never meant to see. For decades, their families received silence. And behind that silence, the mountain waited. For more than 60 years, the Dyatlov case has lived between science and myth. Every new generation reopens the file, hoping to find what Soviet investigators could not. A reason. But the reason, whatever it is, still resists the light. The avalanche theory. It's the most logical. It's the one that makes headlines every decade. According to this version, a small snow slab, not a full avalanche, shifted during the night. It pressed against the tent, causing the hikers to panic and cut their way out. They fled into the dark, half-dressed, disoriented, only to freeze to death before dawn. In 2021, Swiss researchers even simulated the event, using computer models based on snowpack behavior. Their conclusion? Possible. But the rescuers who stood at the site in 1959 disagreed. The tent was still standing, the skis unbroken, and the slope too shallow to produce a deadly slide. There were no signs of snow displacement. The avalanche explanation remains the most accepted, and the least convincing: the military test theory. In 1959, the Soviet Union was in the middle of intense Cold War experimentation. Ural regions near the Dyatlov site were known for parachute mine tests and radiation experiments. Some of the hikers' clothing showed radiation levels 3 times higher than normal background. A military diary from that winter mentioned light orbs seen near missile test corridors. Locals described silent orange spheres moving across the sky the same night the hikers died. Their accounts matched records of atmospheric weapon tests conducted hundreds of kilometers away. If a parachute mine exploded nearby, the pressure wave could explain the internal injuries with no external trauma. But then, why no blast marks on the snow? Why no crater? And why was the case classified as a state secret for more than 30 years? The infrasound theory. In 2013, a group of scientists proposed something else. Not physical, but psychological. The mountain's unique shape could produce a Kármán vortex street, a pattern of wind vortices that generates low-frequency sound waves, barely audible to humans, but capable of inducing panic, nausea, and disorientation. If that's true, the hikers might have experienced a wave of pure fear, a biological alarm with no visible cause. In confusion, they fled the tent into the freezing night, unable to reason or regroup. The theory explains the panic, but not the radiation, the crushed bones, or the missing tongue. It's science touching the edge of myth, the Montsi and the Forbidden Zone. For years, some blamed the local Montsi people, the indigenous reindeer herders of the region. But there was no evidence of conflict. The Montsi guides helped in the search, and their folklore only added to the mystery. They said that the mountain, Kholat Syakhl, the mountain of the dead, was not meant to be climbed. It was a place of spirits. They warned that disturbing it would anger the mountain itself. When Soviet officers heard this, they laughed. But some of the searchers didn't. They said the valley felt wrong. A deep silence that pressed on the ears. A place where even wind sounded like breathing, the human factor. A lesser-known theory suggests a confrontation, perhaps with military patrols, or escaped convicts from nearby labor camps. Some hikers' injuries looked like they had been struck by blunt objects, not by the environment. Yet no signs of a fight. No foreign footprints. No blood trail near the tent. If it was an attack, it was surgical and inexplicable. The radiation and the secret mission. Another possibility. They weren't just students. Several group members had military backgrounds, connections to classified research. Two had previously worked in factories producing radioactive materials. Some believe the trip was not only recreational, but an unofficial mission to collect samples or observe weapons testing. That could explain the secrecy, the radiation, and why the investigation was quietly shut down after Moscow intervened. But there is no proof. Only missing pages in the case file, and altered photographs, the natural but unnatural theory. Perhaps all of these things, avalanche, sound, radiation, combined that night. A small slab of snow collapses. A rush of wind triggers panic. The hikers flee into the open. Some fall. Some break bones. Some crawl toward the forest. By dawn, the mountain takes the rest. It sounds plausible, until you remember that the Soviet investigation called it an unknown compelling force. No government uses those words lightly over 60 years later. No theory fully fits the evidence. No answer closes the wound. Each explanation solves one piece and breaks another. Maybe that's why the case endures. Because it's not a story about how they died, but about how we fear the unknown. The Dyatlov Pass is not just a place on a map. It's a metaphor for every truth that disappears when power meets silence. 60 years after that night, the mountain was still silent, and the world was still listening. In 2019, the Russian Prosecutor General's office quietly reopened the Dyatlov case. They sent new teams to the site, used drones, radar imaging, and forensic mapping. Their conclusion was meant to end the story once and for all. It didn't. They confirmed what modern science could simulate: a snow slab avalanche, triggered by rare but measurable conditions. High winds, unstable snow layers. A small shift caused by the hikers cutting into the slope for their tent. According to the model, a compact block of snow slid just enough to crush part of the tent. In panic and confusion, the group fled downhill into -30°C darkness. Disoriented, some froze. Others fell into the ravine and suffered fatal internal injuries. It was a clean, rational conclusion, except for everything it couldn't explain. Why were their clothes radioactive? Why were their bodies scattered across different distances? Why was one tongue missing? And their watches stopped hours apart? And why did the military lock the case for decades? If it was just an avalanche, even modern investigators admitted, some details remain unresolved. The mountain gave back evidence, but not meaning. Scientists can reconstruct snow pressure and wind velocity, but not the sound of panic. Not the moment when 9 people decided that outside the tent was safer than inside. In 2020, Swiss engineers published a simulation inspired by Pixar's Frozen, literally using Disney's snow physics engine to recreate the conditions of Dyatlov Pass. Their result? The snow could indeed break ribs and skulls, without leaving visible bruises. It explained the trauma, but not the fear. Because even if the snow fell, something else made them flee barefoot into death. And that something remains unnamed. Today, the Dyatlov Pass stands as both memorial and question mark. Tourists hike there each winter, leaving flowers, candles, and small wooden signs that read, "Peace to the hikers." In Yekaterinburg, a museum holds their diaries, their cameras, their final photographs, frozen moments of laughter before the mountain swallowed them. Their words, recovered from a soaked notebook, read, "The weather is bad, but our spirits are high. We will reach the pass." They never did. In 2021, scientists, journalists, and families agreed on one thing: no explanation will ever feel complete. Because the Dyatlov mystery is not about snow or wind. It's about what happens when certainty disappears. Every theory is a mirror, reflecting not the dead, but the living. Our obsession with truth, our fear of chaos, our need to believe the world makes sense. But sometimes, the world doesn't. And maybe that's what the mountain tried to teach us: the wind never lies. But it never tells the whole story either.